Good afternoon once again to our listeners on Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, our viewers on the Parliament channel, and those of you joining us on the World Wide Web, on the Parliament's website, www.ttparliament.org, and via our YouTube channel, ParlView. Just a few seconds away from the resumption of today's sitting of the Senate, debate is underway on a motion moved by the Attorney General to approve the Privileges and Immunities CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security Order 2016. We've had contributions from several senators thus far, and we expect that debate will continue when the Senate resumes. Let's take you over to the chamber for the resumption.
The Honorable, the Vice President.
We now return to our coverage of the 23rd sitting of the Senate in the first session of the 11th Parliament that takes place on Tuesday, June 14th, 2016.
Senator Samuel.
Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, before the tea break.
Senator Samuel, hold on for a second. We still don't have a quorum yet because the Honorable Attorney General isn't counted in the quorum. No? Okay. We now have 10. So, Senator Samuel, may go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, before the tea break, we were talking about the impact on the region, on crime and violence. And the impact is a severe one, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, in a document from called the Caribbean Crime Wave, The Economist, the writer, this was published on March 20th, 2008, and it's way back then, talks about the vulnerability of the region, but he also talked about the fact that according to the report from the UN Office on Drugs, the UNODC, Drugs and Crime, around 216 tons of cocaine pass through the Caribbean in any given year. 216 tons of cocaine. That is in 2008. Could you imagine what is taking place even as we live today in 2016? As a matter of fact, that same report says, Mr. Vice President, that in 2006, the World Bank survey, 39% of business managers in the Caribbean said that they were less likely to expand their business because of crime. And while 37% responded that crime had discouraged investments that would have improved their business productivity. It is important for us to take note of that the region is affected. Tourism in the region is affected, and the work of IMPACS is far more crucial to the region. It's important to the region that they function effectively and they achieve the things that they were designed and designated to achieve in the region. And the region must now see proof and must experience visible proof of their impact upon the region. And it's important for that because somebody asks, what is the impact? I think it's Senator wrote, what impact IMPACS has had, or Senator Mark. And it's important for us to understand the impact that they have had and how effective it has been in the region. Because for many of the small island states, tourism is one of his main earnings, and if that is affected through crime, and if that is affected through gang-related crimes, if that is affected through drug trafficking, then the region is going to be affected. And I want to bring up something through you to the Attorney General, because with the opening up of the possible opening up of trade to Cuba, if you read the statistics on crime in Cuba, major crimes that we suffer in our region is not associated with Cuba. And it means that there would be a good market for, as the embargo is lifted, for people to shift from coming to our part of the world and then getting into Cuba. A loss of earnings for the region. Loss of earning means what? Loss of productivity. Loss of productivity means what? Crime rates will escalate. Everything will escalate because people will find illegal means of survival. So that is something that when we talk about IMPACS, we have got to realize that their work is far more tedious, it's harder, it's far more serious than made to believe or the average citizen ever understood what they were designated to do because of the seriousness of the time that we are living in. So, Mr. Vice President, not only that, but I began talking about the idea of CARICOM to bring together the faith-based organizations to look into in a conference in 2014 and to find ways and means to help CARICOM to deal with the issues of crime and poverty and all those things that are associated. And Mr. Vice President, that is so necessary in the region. Why? Because the second highest constituency in the region is the faith-based organizations. If you take a survey, besides the political parties, faith-based organizations are the strength numerically in a society. And if that's the case, politics alone cannot solve crime. It means that the idea of CARICOM to convene a conference with faith-based organizations to look at it was a wise one. I'm not too sure what happened after the first one in 2014, but it should be continued, because if you are to remove the work of faith-based organizations in our societies in the region, pull them out of the pit here, none of us could exist in this region. None of us could live in the region. As a matter of fact, if you move the social work, and the Honorable Attorney General through you would recognize, if you pull out the work of the faith-based organizations in the society, in the prisons, in the communities, then what you would find is a community and a society that none of us could live in. And you must strengthen that, and they must play an integral role in the region, in the local communities, to now help deal with the incidences and the issues of crime and gang-related situations and drug trafficking in our society. It is important for us to know that. And we must, IMPACS must use them. IMPACS must draw them. IMPACS must have some kind of collaboration with the second largest constituencies in the region. It's important to know that. But, Mr. Vice President, according to the Memorandum of Understanding between the United Nations and IMPACS, there was supposed to be in Article 5, which is called publicity. And Article 5 says on publicity, when acting jointly in the execution of a project, the parties will, 1, coordinate public messages such as press releases, press communiques regarding joint projects. Now, if you walked on the streets and you did a survey and you asked the average citizen of Trinidad and Tobago if he knows anything about IMPACS, he'll want to know, what on earth are you talking about? Because we are trying to deal with it from a high level, but it's not, the information and the communication has not been filtering down to the different islands in the region, and then from that level down to the man who has to understand that there is something at a CARICOM level that is now dealing with the issues of crime and drug trafficking and all of its related situations. Number 2 says that they will acknowledge the role and contributions of each of the parties as appropriate in all public information. So there was supposed to be some kind of public information and documentation relating to instances of cooperation. To this end, the parties will consult with each other concerning the manner and forms of such recognitions and acknowledgement. So there was supposed to be some kind of educating the society of the work of IMPACS, which we know nothing about. So it is something that through you, Mr. Vice President, that the Attorney General needs, as he's taking note of it, must realize in Article 5 there was supposed to be something called publicity for IMPACS, and IMPACS was supposed to be informing publicly the work, what is going on, what is happening, the approaches, where the collaborative efforts have been, and how effective it has been in the region, and what they have been able to achieve. That has not been happening. So it's important for us to see that. And for that not to happen, it means that they have not been achieving their aims and objectives. Because you would want the region to know. You would want people to know how effective this is. That this is not just a highly political situation with hierarchies of the region getting together to sit down and have some kind of tea and coffee to talk about crime. This is something that the region wants that should happen, and they should know how effective it's been happening over the years since its inception. Furthermore, we in Trinidad and Tobago, where the office is, knows nothing about it. And we should be, it's so close to us in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Vice President, and still in Trinidad and Tobago, we have little information of the impact of IMPACS. And it's something that we should consider. But Mr. Vice President, the issue of crime and all its related partners, as I call it, is not just a social issue. It's not just a moral issue, but it's a spiritual issue. And that is why it was wise to draw the faith-based organizations into the fight against crime. And IMPACT must get them involved. And because in many instances, for political reasons, people are afraid to do certain things to deal with crime. In many instances, politically, they act conveniently when it comes to crime, because the impact it will have will be in one way or the other adverse or in favor of. And it's because, Mr. Vice President, in the region, we are afraid to abide by something We are afraid to abide by something that Solomon said. That Solomon said something very wisely in Ecclesiastes chapter 8 and verse 11. Solomon.
One of them smart.
He said, because...
But only one is blessed.
I will continue.
Sorry, apologies. What does Solomon say?
Solomon said, Mr. Vice President, and I'm saying that this is the real cause of the increase in the region, because in many instances, political parties and governments are afraid to abide by this. And the system has to be put in place to abide by it. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily. Therefore, the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil.
Jesus Christ.
Because the sentencing for an evil work is not executed speedily, the sons of men are set in their heart to do evil. So in the region, we are now dealing with people who are set to do evil, and IMPACS must know that. IMPACS must know that it is not just a by chance society that we are dealing with who are committing things by chance, but IMPACS must know that we have a society that is set. Criminals are set. Drug lords are set. Traffickers are set in their heart to do evil because sentencing is not done swiftly. That's a fact. So IMPACS will have no impact if IMPACT doesn't understand that if you don't abide by this, the wisdom of Solomon, IMPACT will be struggling along its journey. So, Mr. Vice President, that's why they must collaborate with the faith-based organizations in the region. And I applaud the conference in 2014, and CARICOM should continue to do it, and IMPACS should continue to do it to get the faith-based organizations involved in the fight against crime and the fight against trafficking and all those entities so that we can deal with it together. But I want the Attorney General, through you as I wrap up, to take note of the fact of the publicity, as I mentioned before, AJ, the publicity where they were supposed to coordinate public messages, such as press releases and press communiques regarding joint projects. That's Article 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding between United Nations and IMPACS. And that acknowledge the role and contribution of each of the parties as appropriate in all public information and documentation relating to instances of cooperation. To this end, the parties will consult with each other concerning the manner and form of such recognition and acknowledgement. Something that has not been done, and as a result of that, the average citizen is unaware of what IMPACT is all about. And as a result of that, IMPACT has really had no impact on our society and our nation based on how the citizen thinks about IMPACT. Mr. Vice President, I want to thank you.
Honorable Attorney General.
Vice President. Mr. Vice President, may I congratulate all members that have contributed today on this very important exercise of confirming the order of His Excellency the President pursuant to Section 9(1) of Chapter 1701, the Privileges and Immunities legislation. Senator Mark raised some very important questions for consideration and answer, as did Senator Samuel, Senator Roach, and Senator Mahabir. If you would permit me, Mr. Vice President, to summarize the inquiries as I've recorded them, and then to perhaps give an omnibus response without disaggregating them as to the particular contributors. Senator Mark painted a very important reminder that Trinidad and Tobago, like its CARICOM neighbors, is in a very significantly difficult position with respect to, as he put it, how murderous our societies are. Indeed, with a ratio of 30 per 100,000, Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica and Guyana stand in a very terrible situation, the three of us. In fact, St. Lucia has had a significant uptick along its path. He did very commendably recognize that that is associated with the phenomenon of source and destination narco trafficking and through our region and the legacies of crime that are left behind. He asked quite importantly, which was amplified by Senator Mahabir and Senator Roach, as to the budget and the status of the agency and the report, particularly as to what was happening with the forensic report into the former director of IMPACS, the executive director. He asked, which was echoed by Senator Mahabir, as to the accountability mechanisms which are in place. And of course, he lamented the position of our porous borders, that there are 136 ports, and as he put it, that 119 of them were not protected. Senator Mark also raised the issue of the efficiency of the organization and asked a very important question for us to consider. What is the value for money to be derived out of this matrix? That was very properly echoed by Senator Mahabir and by Senator Roach and indeed by Senator Samuel. Permit me therefore, Mr. Vice President, of course recognizing the very capable contribution of my learned colleague, the leader of Senate business here, the Honorable Senator Khan, to now give an omnibus response. If I may inform Mr. Vice President that in dealing with the amendment, in dealing with the order as we have right now, the order before us must be contemplated within the context of where it comes from and what we are permitted to do. This order is essentially an hybrid product of the 2006 agreement establishing the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, and also the agreement between the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the CARICOM IMPACS relative to the headquarters of the implementation agency. The first document that I referred to is a 2006 document. The second document is a 2009 document. It is from those two essential source documents that the privileges and immunities to be considered by His Excellency the President, pursuant to Section 9 of the Privileges and Immunities Legislation, Chapter 1701, comes. And therefore, we are permitted to go only insofar as the specific textual agreement permits us in the two source documents, 2006, 2009, as filtered through the legislation itself. Specifically, Senator Mark's very excellent inquiries about budget, value for money, and also the status of the forensic report, etc. I'm able to report that I've in fact received information from CARICOM IMPACS, and I am told that indeed there was an inquiry pursuant to a newspaper report produced in 2011. It wasn't by Kamini Maraj. I've since found out it's by Akil Simon, who oddly enough found himself incarcerated for other reasons.
Yes.
Quite a tragic situation. I believe he's out on bail right now. But his report, nonetheless, was a very good report, and it sparked an inquiry. In fact, it was the last government that undertook to pay for that report, and there was a forensic report which was conducted by Ernst & Young in 2011. The government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago paid $50,000 for that report, and quite properly, that report was not one which the government of Trinidad could speak on, obviously, because pursuant to the two source documents, what we have to deal with is carrying that information back to the Council of Ministers. That was in fact taken back to the Council of Ministers, as a result of which the executive director was dismissed without cause. Now, without cause means that you would pay the person who is leaving the institution, and in fact payments were made, and there was an amicable departure, suffice it to say. So that is to answer the forensic report. That drives in fact, to the very structures of accountability with which all three senators Senators Mahabir, Senator Mark, and Senator Samuel raised. And it was a very good inquiry. How can we be sure that IMPACS is being properly audited? What is the budget that is permitted? Are we getting value for money? Those are very real questions which we as a country, particularly in this economic environment, must ask ourselves. I am informed that the budget of IMPACS in US dollars is $6.8 million per annum. That's the last budget. Of that, Trinidad and Tobago has contributed 1.6 million US dollars, roughly 23.5% of the budget. The other nations have contributed $1.9 million US, being 27.9% of the budget. That leaves roughly 49.5% unfunded. And specifically to answer whether the organizational structure is in place, IMPACS has a full organizational structure and has had so since 2006. Obviously, with a near 50% underfunding in terms of its operational capacity, not its projects. The operational capacity is the budget of 6.8. Projects are funded by donors, and I'll come to that in a moment. What has happened is that the full human resource complement has not been able to be hired. So IMPACS is therefore forced to work with less than capacity as a result of the inefficiency of contribution by member states. Clearly, Trinidad has done its part. And therefore, one may ask, well, why is Trinidad and Tobago doing its part to this extent? Why fund 50% of 50%? That's essentially what we're doing. And that comes down to the very sensible inquiries by my learned colleagues in the Senate. What is our value for money? And that value for money can be factored in terms of the work product. And I would invite members to consider in particular two very important work products that CARICOM IMPACS produces, and which, to use the expression coined, has a serious impact, because it is very significant in particular for us in Trinidad and Tobago. That is the Advanced Passenger Cargo, the Advanced Passenger Information System, and next on stream by the third quarter of this year, the Advanced Cargo Information System. Now, the Advanced Passenger Information System has allowed us as a country, IMPACS has had a huge impact. So far for 2016, they have scrubbed as they call it, 22 million passengers. By the end of this year, they will have scrubbed 40 million passengers. And by the third quarter of this year, when the Advanced Cargo Information System is brought in, thanks to a joint funding arrangement between the European Union and the United Nations, one of the subcommittees of the United Nations, and just permit me to get it right, that's UNCAD. What we will have then is the ability to scrub the cargo information coming in for all imports into Trinidad and Tobago. Now that is of immense import to Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, that means all shipments coming into Trinidad and Tobago by any cargo, sea, plane, is definitely going to be subject to advanced information, scrubbed through IMPACS, filtered to the revenue authorities in Trinidad and Tobago, including customs, VAT, etc. And that therefore allows not only the tracing of the cargo, but the predictability of revenue for cargo. Because you no longer wait for cargo to land, for it to, in fact, go through just the Asecuda system or Asecuda World Plus as we have here, but you now have the ability to have the advanced information come in, and that allows for coordination not only for revenue collection, revenue management, but for customs supervision. And, as Senator Hadid quite sensibly puts out, for policing and law enforcement. Because you can now coordinate the tracking. That has an impact in precursor chemicals, an impact in weapons and ammunition, in arms, and the screening of import material into Trinidad and Tobago. So that, I dare say, is a signal, those two products alone, leaving aside typologies for crimes, leaving aside the regional work that is done in terms of the management of intelligence flows, be it on foreign terrorist fighters or terrorism, etc. Those two products alone, I think, are well worth Trinidad and Tobago's contribution of $1.6 million US per annum, because that means that we get to tighten our revenue, tighten the supervision, get a better understanding of where we go, and close the gaps in the equation. I can't overstress the importance of what the advanced passenger information has done for our country. The advanced passenger information system has effectively allowed us the opportunity to have screening of all individuals, not only locally, but immediately with Interpol and with all articulating agencies. And that, in fact, is the very mechanism that we as a country and other countries have in tracing foreign terrorist fighters. Senator Mark noted a startling number of alleged foreign terrorist fighters. His figures are supported, in fact, by recent publications of the Financial Intelligence Unit, where Trinidad and Tobago ranks at number 14 in the world in terms of per capita contribution of foreign terrorist fighters, according to the information produced by the head of the FIU. And that's no small phenomenon. And therefore, one understands the serious import and value for money to be gained from the works of CARICOM IMPACS. That alone is something that is worth the $1.6 million US per year, let alone the scrubbing to come on cargo information. So I thought it important to focus on those two items alone. It is a fact, obviously, that they do so much more than that. CARICOM IMPACS, as we know, is a headquarters agency. It has two subsets, as Senator Mark put out to us. They are what is referred to in acronym JRCC, which is the Joint Regional Communication Center, and the RIFC, which is the Regional Intelligence Fusion Center. Both work on a 24/7 basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, under-resourced, under human power capacity, but have the benefit of doing what they do. Why? Because agencies such as this receive international donor funding. They are viewed to be opposite to the best interests of our society, and therefore, thank God Almighty, they receive donor funding. And the donor funding is no small sum. The EU alone has committed to 7 to 8 million euro this year. We receive approximately 60 million TT dollars in revenue for projects, CARICOM IMPACS. There are millions of US dollars, etc. And it is the very reason, because we bother to coalesce as a CARICOM unit to speak, as I said, in piloting this order, as one body with one voice, that we're able to demonstrate that we are to be taken seriously. And from that purpose alone, I think that CARICOM IMPACS has made significant impact, and it is deserving not only of support in today's order, but certainly of a public commendation from all of us. Because the fact is, 2009, 2010, straight up to 2016, they have borne the burden of us as a country not having put into law some of the benefits and provisions that we could have. Of course.
Honorable Attorney General, could you tell us, even though member states are not contributing as they ought to, they would still be recipients of the information, like advanced passenger,
Yes.
as well as what you're talking about in terms of cargo, even though they are not contributing?
Yes, Senator Mark, that's in fact correct. And one may view that with some degree of acknowledgement of subsidy, but the system is in fact not so far different from the University of the West Indies, or from CARICOM, or from any other of the regional entities that engage Trinidad and Tobago's support. As a leader of CARICOM, if I could say that Trinidad and Tobago is, and proud to say so, I think it is that we must agree that there's some things that we just have to do and support. The work product out of the University of the West Indies, the work enterprise out of CARICOM, all of these things I think our country has accepted is useful for us as a leader of CARICOM, because as the world shrinks in terms of globalization, so too does the preeminence of CARICOM become even more important, because what we need to do is to recognize if we are splintered and fragmented in our approach. The big issues on de-risking, corresponding banking, the impact to the non-profit organizations. I mean, Senator Samuel gave a very laudable commendation in recognizing that the ecclesiastic or non-profit centers, the religious-based enterprises are significant entities to drive our population, and unplug them from the situation as he put forward, and you will see the collapse of many an institution, prisons, etc. What would we do without Vision on a Mission, or the Catholic Church, or the Pentecostal Church, or the Hindus or the Muslims involved in many of our societies? So it is definitely a worthwhile point to note that if we don't speak as a voice, de-risking non-profit organizations, as the world now says in FATF, hits us hard. And therefore the non-governmental support, the non-governmental organizational support that receive international funding automatically cripples the performance in our society. So it's important for us to subsidize some of these arrangements, albeit quite openly as we do in CARICOM IMPACS, because there's a lot to be purchased from it. Indeed, it is certainly to be amplified that our Trinidad and Tobago manufacturing sector, as we look for the strengthening in the CARICOM market, obviously will be strengthened by approaches such as the Advanced Cargo Information System and the Advanced Passenger Information System. All senators that I've referred to, 3, and of course Senator Khan referred to it as well, spoke about the need for budget. You know, well, who guards the guard? And Senator Mark gave us that very good example of what had happened with the past executive director, since replaced, etc. And I think it important, therefore, in answering that concern, to point members to the specifics of the 2006 and 2009 source documentation, which we are essentially hybridizing under the Privileges and Immunity Legislation, Chapter 1701, to now give birth to this order by way of affirmative resolution, if I may be so presumptuous to say. And it's important to note, relative to the issue of, here we go, structures for accountability, as Senator Mahabir put it, paraphrasing what Senator Mark, of course, had put. It is the Council of Ministers under this arrangement, the CARICOM IMPACS arrangement, that is responsible for the mind and management and ultimate sanction and authority for this institution. That is to be found at Article 6.4 of the agreement, the 2006 agreement. And then that contemplates a structure where an executive director, which is established under Article 7, performs the roles, actually accounts and gives functional reporting to the council itself, and then is subject to audit and accountability cycles that the Council of Ministers put together. The budget is very specifically stated in Article 8 of the agreement, and that budget goes through what must be done, what must be reported on, etc. And as we saw in the very case of the executive director that Senator Mark brought to our attention, that was a case where, had there not been this structure, an errant executive director would have been free to go. And what actually happened, quite responsibly, is that the audit by Ernst & Young was then taken to the council, and then the council acted. So clearly there is evidence that this system is one that certainly can work and has worked. Senator Mahabir raised a very important question, and that had to deal with the foreign currency and the adequacy, etc., those provisions. Now, I in fact raised this issue at LRC when the issue came up. If under Section 37 of the Interpretation Act, you're being created and incorporated as a body corporate, all powers of body corporates come on to you. Why would you therefore need to expressly state the power to borrow money, hold money, etc.? There are no restrictions here in a larger sense of the word. There are certain specific restrictions that banks may have as to foreign currency movement by way of declarations, etc. But we're an open economy in every sense. You can have accounts in euro, in Canadian, in US, in whatever currencies are traded in Trinidad and Tobago and can be held in bank accounts. Indeed, the answer given back was specific. Whilst it may appear to be superfluous insofar as a statutory entity created under Section 37 of the Interpretation Act may already have these powers, and one may argue that Article 9 may therefore be superfluous, or Section 9. The answer given is look to the treaty documents. Look at the agreement, look at the headquarters agreement, and you will see that the states agreed as a matter of absolute essential requirement in law that Articles 10 to 15 inclusive had to find their way into the expression of law. And specifically, when you look to the two documents, you will see that there's an obligation, a positive obligation, to repeat the freedom to hold in this fashion. But I want to say that, in fact, I'm warned that there is a safeguard to all of this. Because the safeguard to be found in Article 12 has to be balanced by the fact that privileges and immunities, which was another point raised by several senators, privileges and immunities aren't absolute under this. The absolute privileges, the concept of absolute privileges and immunities is fettered openly in the source documentation, so that the member states may agree and direct through the council it is inappropriate to ask for the immunity. So if someone claimed an immunity, which can only be an immunity in the course of your official function, it's not in the course of your official function to commit murder. It's not in the course of your official function to be coming from a party and drunk. It's not in the course of your official function to commit fraud. So there are exceptions by the use of the phrase official function, but more particularly, it's the council of the very CARICOM states of which we are a part and a major shareholder in that gets to direct CARICOM IMPACS and say, look, it's inappropriate for you to even wave the flag of waiver. We direct you to waive it specifically. And that is to be found in Article 16, waiver of immunities, exceptions, and privileges, and that's in the 2006 agreement establishing the entity, and specifically that the council, in Article 16 it says the executive director may waive, but there's a wonderful catch-all clause that says, in similar circumstances as under the same conditions, meaning the executive director, the council may waive any immunity, exemption, or privilege in respect of the executive director or otherwise. Senator Roach.
Madam President, through you, could you just tell me, in the instance of the executive director, is there an agreement for it to be on a rotational basis, or that is not part of the perception?
I haven't seen it in the source documentation, so I don't believe that it is there. I will certainly, perhaps there's a tacit agreement at a CARICOM level or otherwise, which can impliedly or expressly direct that position, but I wouldn't be able to give you a definitive answer on it. But it certainly isn't, because I've traversed both agreements. It's not to be found in the 2006 or 2009 document. And relative to the issue of taxation, our country has reserved, and the treaties, the two documents have reserved onto the fact that the Trinidad and Tobago nationals are subject to taxation, etc. So they don't receive any exemption. And it's repeated such that the non-Trinidad and Tobago nationals who come from other CARICOM states are entitled to be taxed from their emoluments as well. So the home territories have reserved their ability to levy their taxation. So there's a neat flow back to foreign territory, and certainly for Trinidad and Tobago nationals, it's not an exemption. So I think that that answers the issue of immunities, the concept of waiver, that it's not an absolute privilege. In fact, we're warned that the mind and management is CARICOM IMPACS itself, which is the council comprising the members themselves. There is a budget, there's an audit cycle. We've seen the proof of that. We've seen that, yes, whilst Trinidad supports 25% of the budget, that's only in respect of operational costs. The donor financing comes to lend the assistance to these specific projects, and the immense value for money for Trinidad and Tobago in two major products are the Advanced Passenger Information System, which does everything, including scrubbing for visas, scrubbing for terrorists who may be on watch lists, scrubbing for persons of interest that law enforcement agencies or Interpol or others may be looking at, and particularly making sure that there's secondary screening. I'm informed that so efficient is the system, by the time the flag goes up, at the minute you scan in for a flight, that information receives the desk of destination, and there's somebody waiting for you at the airport. Imagine that system now applied to cargo, and what the effect of that will be in terms of our revenue potential. It in fact eliminates some of the type of discretion in our supervisory authorities that you may not want to have, where people may turn a willful or blind eye to certain cargo, customs duties, etc. When you match up the scrubbing for cargo together with the Asecuda World Plus system, you're going to catch more people by tightening the net, because you're cross-referencing essentially. The Asecuda World Plus system used by customs has been immensely successful insofar as you're now able to cross-reference source information. So when somebody comes and makes a declaration and says, well, I paid $20 for this, which is a clearly under-invoiced situation, the cross-referencing done by Asecuda World Plus says, well, in another matter for the same good, for the same type, under the same classification, whap, here's a copy of that invoice which shows that the cost price is really $100. And automatically customs knows to go and exercise the warrant and then to receive the information, and that helps with our revenue management and leakage situation. If we can track 22 million people as at today's date for 2016, with the figure going up to 44 million, 40 million by the end of this year, imagine what that will look like on cargo containers. So that is something I think we can be very happy to look forward to. On the criminal justice side of the equation, on anti-crime maneuvers, that typology and that tightening and sharing of information is of course an immense work product for trafficking in persons, for border management. Senator Mark raised a very good question. What's going on at the port in Cedros? I'm very pleased to say that for the first time, Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela are in the process of conducting joint patrol exercises. That's no small event. If you have a source border coming across the Gulf of Paria and to the south at Galleon's Passage, then you have to understand that joint patrols make for immense impact. Our borders have not been supervised since for a very long time, until 2015, 2016 when we got the vessels. We went through as a country the experience of watching the OPVs cancelled and other things happen. Suffice it to say, right now as a government, our obligation is to put into effect the supervision of maritime borders and control mechanisms to protect our offshore assets, and particularly to police that. And customs and immigration have moved in to the port of Cedros, to San Fernando, to Chaguaramas, to a number of the ports. The vessels are patrolling on a constant basis, and we now have the ability to do certainly much better than was being done before. Understand, under the United Nations obligations, we have a mission which is sacrosanct to treat people that come as humanitarian refugees with a certain degree of dignity. The Prime Minister, I know, instructed that facilities be deployed to the major areas where Venezuelans, for instance, are coming in, so that basic conveniences like toilet facilities, places to stay, etc., actually happen, so you don't have people sleeping in the square or having to relieve themselves in less than humane circumstances. That's what a country has an obligation to do, and which is being done. I can say, as a matter of fact, if I look to my own constituency of San Fernando West, when I look at the maneuvers and exercises that were conducted by the police, customs, immigration, army, and Coast Guard, with 225 people deployed onto a particular area in my constituency, it produced good results, and that is working over and over again. It's on the sea, it's on the ground, but it is led by intelligence-driven activity. CARICOM IMPACS being only one of those intelligence-driven activities, coordinating with the other entities that we now have in our arsenal as a government. I don't believe that there is much more to say in answer. Oh, thank you, Senator Samuel. Senator Samuel raised the issue of publicity. I undertake to carry forward that recommendation. The publicity requirement is not in the source documentation, unlike the United Nations Treaty Memorandum of Understanding. It is a very useful one. Certainly any entity that wishes to receive more funding is going to do more advertisement as to its successes and track record. We hope that as the agency receives better funding, certainly some of the better funding will come by the exemptions from liabilities for taxation, etc., which this will do. Thank you, Senator Roach. I forgot the point of labor. But certainly the publicity aspect will come forward. Senator Roach has very kindly reminded me that I have not dealt with the issue of the labor law. Technically, in the course of your duties, is subject of immunity. That would mean, from my understanding of the position, that we would be obliged to actually apply the laws in our own country because it's not express, so that you would have the ability to have to be taken before a court. You may have the flag waved as to having an immunity, but there's an express waiver position allowed here, and therefore I would believe where the law is silent that we'll be dealing with the lex loci, which is the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and that we'll be subjected to the jurisdiction of the courts. I could not see that the Council of Ministers, that the Council of IMPACS could ever intrude upon somebody's ventilation of a right before a court which involves itself in due process. And from that standpoint, not having the necessary information, my own estimation is that it would be hard to escape a challenge that you could be subjected to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to industrial relations or labor laws in our country. Please, Senator.
Yeah, the only reason why I'm asking for that clarification, Madam President, through you, is that IMPACT will be located in different regions, in different countries, and the labor laws in the different regions may be slightly different. So you may have one issue being dealt with in a more favorable or less favorable position, the case may be. So I was wondering whether or not in that agreement that was taken into consideration, that you would have a uniform labor laws applying to everybody employed with it, regardless of where they may be posted.
So it's a very good question, Senator. From my review of the source documents, 2006 and 2009 has not been canvassed. There would be therefore an implied application of the law on the lex loci principle. In any event, under the conflict of laws provision, either in public international law or private international law, one can rely upon the doctrine of renvoi or double renvoi, depending upon the circumstances, so that a judge sitting would be invited to view the laws as to whether they apply in Trinidad or within the home territory where they come from. But insofar as emoluments are taxed at source, and source may be in Trinidad and Tobago, subject to Trinidad and Tobago laws, you could probably look at it from an ordinary resident's point of view within the interpretation of the inland revenue and how it's applied. So not an easy answer, involving multiple areas of law, be they labor laws, be they private international laws, public international laws, or conflict of laws provisions, and perhaps involving the good offices of the CARICOM members that have participated in CARICOM IMPACS itself. I apologize that I can't give you a more profound or explicit answer on it. Senator Mahavir?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you very much, AG, for giving way. AG, Honorable AG, I have two areas that I need clarification on. One, I know you can clarify, and one, I hope you will be able to clarify. The first is with respect to a phenomenon internationally which has occurred amongst residents of a country transacting with diplomats, that is the non-payment of rent. I would simply like to get clarification from you on whether, under existing law, an employee of IMPACS who owes back rent to a landlord in Trinidad and Tobago will be compelled by the laws of Trinidad and Tobago to pay his rent if the landlord takes him to court within Trinidad and Tobago. I know you'd be able to answer that one, but the other one, which I have and which I need clarification on, is this. In the order, it is stated that upon representation by the government of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to the foreign exchange holdings of the IMPACS will give that due regard. I would like to know, what does that mean? I do not understand due regard. Is it that they have to listen to what the Minister of Finance is telling them? Is it that they will consider it? Or is it that they are free to do as they please, having given it due consideration with respect to a foreign exchange situation? Thank you.
Attorney General, you have 4 minutes.
sorry.
I will rush fast. Number one, I don't know if you have a conflict of interest to declare in respect of rental. I'm just teasing. But certainly, if it's in the course of duty, there would be a potential defense that someone can give. I can hardly see that in the course of duty can apply there. And in any event, the council can certainly direct that it is inappropriate to seek that. On the second limb, I would think that the persuasion is, as it always is in international law, one of comity, and that one would rely upon the good offices of the representation under the rules of comity to be applied, and that a resolution could be found. Perhaps with 2.5 minutes left then, hopefully having ventured just an answer to that in that barest term, may I thank you, Madam President, for allowing me to address the Senate. May I thank the honourable members for a very lively and intelligent contribution all, and I do hope that this order can receive the affirmation of the Senate and that we can do what has been long in the making, and I beg to move.
Honourable Senators, I'll now put the question. Be it resolved that the Privileges and Immunities CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security IMPACS Order 2016 be approved. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Privileges and Immunities CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security IMPACS Order 2016 is approved. Honourable Senators, with the leave of the Senate, I'd like to revert to item 4 on the order paper.
Bills brought from the House of Representation on the supplemental order paper, the Family and Children Division Bill 2016, in the name of the Attorney General.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 62B, I beg to move that the next stage of the bill be taken at a sitting of the Senate to be held on Tuesday, June 21st, 2016.
Honourable Senators, the question is that the next stage of the bill be taken at a sitting of the Senate to be held on Tuesday, June the 21st, 2016. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Leave is granted. The next stage of the bill will be taken at a sitting of the Senate to be held on Tuesday, June the 21st, 2016.
Madam President, I beg to move that the Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2016 at 10 a.m. And as we have already indicated that we will be debating the Family and Children's Division Bill, and time permitting, we will also attempt to do at least one of the motions on the committee business. Very likely the Joint Select Committee on Government Assurances. Said time permitting, but as I'm on the point of time permitting, Tuesday the 21st of June is the summer solstice. It's the longest day in the Northern Hemisphere, so we expect a long day in the Senate on Tuesday. I so move, Madam.
Honourable Senators, before I put the matter of the adjournment, we will be celebrating Labour Day over the next few days, so I will invite members to bring greetings. Minister of Labour.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Honorable Government Senators, independent senators, and senators of the opposition bench. I am indeed gratified as Minister with responsibility for Labour and Small Enterprise Development to address you all this evening and to bring greetings to the trade union movement as it prepares to observe the 79th anniversary of what is referred to as the Butler Oilfield Riots of 1937. And what many will argue was the defining moment that gave birth to the labor movement as we know it in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam President, every year on June 19th, we observe Labor Day. I myself, in my other incarnation, would have enjoyed many a Labor Day and would have made many a statement from the Labor Day platform. However, in 1973, the then government declared it a public holiday, giving rise to thousands converging on Charlie King Junction to celebrate the forefathers of the labor movement, who in essence carved a path for labor in Trinidad and Tobago, and by their contributions illustrated the definition of struggle, collectivism, and solidarity to a cause in ways that are not always as clear through other lenses. Madam President, we cannot deny the invaluable and unmeasured contributions of the trade union movement to the social and economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. And whilst the relationship between government and the trade union movement is not always a walk in the park, ladies and gentlemen, to thine own selves be true, that cannot be the expectation. And as in the words of that trade unionist, former Senator Wade Mark colleague, when he was at the banking union, the president of the Banking, Insurance, and General Workers Union, Vincent Cabrera, when he said that the trade union movement is there to be a thorn in the side of government. So I dare say the relationship is not always rosy, no pun intended, Madam President. But that said, as a Minister of Labor and Small Enterprise Development, I have given each of the respective trade union umbrella organizations, that is the Joint Trade Union Movement, the National Trade Union Center, and the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and Non-Governmental Organizations, the undertaking to meet with them regularly to discuss matters of critical import as we seek to work together for the benefit of the citizenry of this Twin Island Republic. Madam President, I returned to Trinidad this morning from the 105th session of the International Labour Conference and engaged in 2 back-to-back meetings with the Honorable Prime Minister and the National Trade Union Center at a little after 10 o'clock this morning, and thereafter the Joint Trade Union Movement about 12 o'clock today. And those 2 meetings, Madam President, I'm happy to report they were good, productive, very frank meetings. And I am heartened by our discussions, and it augurs well for the relationship to date. I know that as the trade unions prepare to embark on their celebrations, they have announced that they will indeed, well, at least the Joint Trade Union Movement, that they will indeed be making an assessment of this government's performance since coming into office. Madam President, our country's present economic situation, the increasing rate of job loss, retrenchment, and outstanding back pay and compensation, these are just some of the issues that this government has had to grapple with in the face of falling oil price and looming economic uncertainty. It is far from a pretty picture, Madam President, but it is our reality, and probably it's a trade unionist in me, but there was never a battle that I backed away from. This government, therefore, is committed to navigating the uncertain course and dealing with the daily struggles. That is the expectation from the electorate, and we will deliver, Madam President. Our trade unions have pioneered every sphere of development in Trinidad and Tobago. We have had social, economic, and political pioneers, the likes of Elmer Francois, Tubal Uriah Bus Butler, who we refer to as the father of the trade union and labor movement, C.L.R. James, Adrian Cola Rienzi, and not forgetting, Madam President, Basdio Pandey, the first Prime Minister to have come from labor. And the list goes on and on. Forgive me, but I cannot name them all at this point in time. But I want to recognize them all and to express my government's appreciation for their collective contribution towards the growth and development of our beloved to an island state. Madam President, Senators, on behalf of the Honorable Prime Minister and the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I wish the trade union movement every success in its upcoming celebrations. I pray for a safe and incident-free celebration as they mark this most auspicious and signal occasion. And I would also like to advise Madam President that the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development will have a presence at Labor Day, as we have had over the past few years, reminding workers, those unemployed, the level and increased services that are available to them in preparing them for new pathways in life. And Madam President, may we always remember the contributions of the trade unionists past and respect the contributions of trade unionists present in the quest for decent work for all. And lest it be said that I forgot, Labor Day this year is being shared with another auspicious occasion, Madam President, Father's Day. To all the fathers in Trinidad and Tobago, and all those fathers present here in this august chambers, I wish you all a very happy Father's Day on Sunday. Madam President, I thank you.
Senator Mark.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I wish to join with the Honorable Minister of Labor, small and micro.
No, no micro.
Small enterprise development. In extending, Madam President, from the very outset, Labor Day greetings to the working class. As we collectively celebrate the very important occasion of June 19th, 2016, which would represent some 79 years since the major social and political uprising and virtual revolution of the working class, led by Chubal Uriah Buzz Butler and his comrades like Adrian Kohler Rienzi and a number of other patriots, which resulted in fundamental constitutional changes at that time, and which recorded major social advances for the working class and the working people. Madam President, Labor has made many tremendous strides in advancing both the living and working conditions of vast numbers of ordinary people in our land and in our nation. But given the recent economic downturn, which has gripped our country, combined with the worsening recession, the working people of our country, on the 79th anniversary of the founding of the modern trade union movement, are faced with major challenges. For example, Madam President, growing unemployment and underemployment, rising income and wealth disparities, rising poverty levels, marginalization of the youth, social exclusion and isolation, poor social services, among other areas. But, Madam President, there is an urgent need for the government, and I'm sorry that my good friend did not mention it, to engage swiftly in comprehensively revising and amending and even introducing new labor legislative measures, all aimed at advancing social protection and safety of the working class and ordinary people. Madam President, I hasten to add some of these labor measures that are critically needed, and I would only have liked measures to have been introduced as we celebrate the 19th of June, Sunday coming, Madam President. Revision of the Industrial Relations Act, that should be done rapidly. Revision of the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act, we couldn't get it faster. The Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, amendments to the Companies Act. And I know that the Honorable Minister has spoken to basic conditions of work. That is a piece of law that the Honorable Minister has promised, which is almost the equivalent of a labor code, the Minister would tell you. So we on this side of the House anxiously look forward to these revolutionary measures and these momentous changes in our labor legislation in the interest of the working class. So, Madam President, we too join with my colleague across the aisle in really recognizing our labor heroes that have gone and those who are laboring in the vineyard as we speak. Once again, we would like to extend warmest greetings and solidarity with the labor movement in particular and the people of Trinidad and Tobago in general on the occasion of the 79th anniversary of the Labor Day movement, or Labor Day as we know it, 2016. I also joined the Honorable Minister in extending happy Father's Day greetings to all our fathers in our nation, and particularly all the fathers in this chamber, on both sides and on all sides, wishing them, Madam President, happy Father's Day. So to the working people of our land and the working people of Trinidad and Tobago, happy Labor Day 2016. And to all our fathers, happy Father's Day.
Senator Mahabir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Sometimes, Madam President, I think life is a little bit unfair because I must bring greetings on behalf of Labor Day following two eminent labor leaders in this chamber. But if I can say in my defense, over the last 30 years, I have worked extensively with the trade union movement. So I feel I have a little bit of moral authority in bringing greetings on behalf of the bench. Madam President, as usual, when I contemplate on a national holiday, I look at its historic origins. And I recalled from the history books that the first time Trinidad and Tobago experienced what we now know as an industrial strike occurred in 1919, October, when the seamen workers and the wharf workers of this country agitated for better working conditions, led by Captain Cipriani in 1919. We then saw the birth of a movement which resulted, in my mind, two very productive strands in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. We saw Captain Cipriani, Albert Gomes, Rienzi, Butler, that particular line moving from the pure trade union movement into the politics of Trinidad and Tobago and contributing immeasurably to the type of legislative structure that we have today. And the contribution of the labor movement to the decision-making process at the highest level, which continues today, is something that I think has augured very well for the evolution of Trinidad and Tobago society. But second, Madam President, when I examined the history of the labor movement, the reason we celebrate Labor Day is that the riots of 1937, following upon the disturbances of the 1920s, there were riots which ended in the loss of life simply because working people were agitating for better working conditions. And in 1937, when we saw the birth of the two oldest trade unions in Trinidad and Tobago, All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union and the OWTU, Oilfield Workers Trade Union, we observed the birth of an institution, an organization governed by structures and laws, collective bargaining, where the inevitable conflict between labor and capital will be resolved in the boardroom via negotiation and not via violent physical confrontation. And the contribution of the labor movement through the structure of collective bargaining, in my mind, has led to a level of peace and stability that would not have occurred if we had not ensured that the trade union movement had grown so that workers in Trinidad and Tobago will find a number of mechanisms so that their grievances could be aired. In fact, when I looked at across the jurisdictions, I see Trinidad and Tobago as very advanced, one of the few countries to have had an industrial court, separate industrial court for the longest while. I think we are pioneers in that area as well. And these institutions have done a remarkable job for ensuring that there is always peace and stability in the country. As we celebrate Labor Day, Madam President, I think we need to recognize the contributions of all those pioneers in the past, those who have made a contribution from labor and into politics, those who have continued to agitate for labor rights and then social rights as a consequence. These are individuals who form a vital component of the fabric of Trinidad and Tobago, and to them we pay homage. There was, in fact, violent confrontation in the past. There is no longer the need for confrontation. We have seen labor leaders in the legislative arm of the state. Now we are in an environment where Trinidad and Tobago is in economic stagnation and in decline. Labor is not as powerful as it once was in obtaining the types of benefits that it wanted for labor, for its employees. But at the same time, we need to recognize that capital is also not as powerful now. The rate of return on capital is declining. There is a new paradigm now and a challenge for the labor movement. As I bring greetings, I would like the labor movement to consider that the association and the conflict between capital is something that we need to review. We have experiences from countries in the past where labor leaders such as Doug Fraser of the United Auto Workers Union actually obtained a seat on the board of the Chrysler Corporation. When Chrysler was on the verge of bankruptcy, he obtained a seat on the board in exchange for wage concessions so that he could protect the jobs of workers. We are in an environment where we need to ensure employment stability. There are challenges for the labor movement. And as I bring greetings, I want to applaud the labor movement for the contributions they have made in the past. And I know they would rise to the challenges of the difficult economic environment we're operating. And on behalf of the independent bench, I bring greetings and express gratitude to the entire institution of labor in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, like those who have spoken before me, I join in bringing greetings on the celebration of Labor Day in Trinidad and Tobago. This is a national holiday that we have now been celebrating as a country for over 4 decades. The celebration focuses not just on the pioneers of the labor movement, but on those now who are involved in the trade union movement, who advocate for workers' rights. And the celebration should also focus on the contributions that workers have made to the economic and social fabric of Trinidad and Tobago. So let me join in wishing everyone, all those involved in the labor movement and the national community, let me join in wishing them a happy celebration of Labor Day 2016. Honorable Senators, the question is that the Senate do now adjourn to Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2016 at 10 a.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This Senate now stands adjourned to Tuesday, the 21st of June, 2016. 2016 at 10 a.m.